Good morning. My name is Philip Munoz. I'm the director of the Center for Citizenship and Constitutional Government, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this morning's event. Let me extend a special welcome to our friends from South Carolina. Welcome to Notre Dame. The center aims to explore the fundamental principles of a free society so that citizens and civic leaders are equipped to secure our God-given natural rights, to exercise the responsibilities of self-government, and to pursue the common good. In particular, our mission includes the cultivation of citizenship. We're focused on educating our Notre Dame students in the duties and responsibilities of being leading citizens of our great nation. And at least I think there's no better way for us to do that than by what we're doing today, introducing the next generation of our citizen leaders to our current generation, a leading citizen of our current generation. There's a handful of individuals here present today that make all the work we do possible. They're very modest, and I won't introduce them by name, but I want them to know how much we appreciate what you do for us, especially the opportunities you provide for our students. So thank you very much. As you know, and I think as the senator knows, next week is election week. We're a divided country right now, unfortunately. I thought we might be able to come together, though. Are there any current office holders or former office holders, elected or appointed office? Might you stand? Thank you for your service to our country. And next week is we celebrate Veterans Day. Any current or any veterans or current servicemen and women, widows? Thank you for your service. Today is a special day for the center. It marks our inaugural Jeannie Poole O'Shaughnessy Lecture. Miss O'Shaughnessy was a member of the Notre Dame family. She was a member of the class of 1986. She was a cheerleader when she was here at Notre Dame. She met her husband is also a Notre Dame graduate. They traveled the world together. And what I'm about to say comes from her husband. As she grew older, Jeannie often thought if young people studied civics, as she called it, they would come to have the same appreciation and love of America as she did. Her devotion to America and her devotion to Notre Dame is how I met her and how she became involved with the center. And I should add, she's a huge fan of Senator Scott's. 14 months ago, Jeannie passed away, very unexpectedly and tragically. Some of Jeannie's dearest friends are here with us today, as is her husband, Patrick, and her daughter, Lillian. Her son, Patrick, is here on campus as well. Notre Dame is a great university, but we're also a family. So Patrick and Lillian, it's our hope that today and in future years, when we gather for this lecture, the Jeannie Poole O'Shaughnessy Memorial Lecture, you will remember that Notre Dame will always be your home, and that Jeannie's legacy of giving to her family and to her country continues. Thank you for being here with us today. We have a tradition here at the center. We have an undergraduate fellows program, our Menard Family Tocqueville Fellows program. And we like to have our students meet our guests, and we always ask a student to introduce our guests. So I'm going to call to the stage Ella Kane. Ella is a junior and a constitutional studies minor, and she will introduce Senator Scott. Ella?
Thank you. Senator Tim Scott has represented South Carolina in the United States Senate since 2013. After growing up mired in poverty in a single-parent household, he strives to change lives through a message of hope and opportunity. In Congress, Senator Scott's leadership has centered on tax reform, education and job training, and providing innovative ideas to reinvest in America's distressed communities. Scott is often one of 11 African Americans who have served in the United States Senate and the first to serve in both chambers of Congress. A self-described unbridled optimist, Senator Scott believes that despite our current challenges, the nation's brightest days are ahead of us. During his time in office, he has been an advocate for creating more opportunities for families living paycheck to paycheck and helping children from impoverished communities access quality education. To this end, he launched the Opportunity Agenda, a legislative package aimed at achieving those goals, as well as the Senate Opportunity Coalition, a group of senators committing to helping those in need. He has also sponsored balanced budget amendments throughout his time in Congress, hoping to assist in controlling national debt and spending. Prior to public service, Senator Scott built a successful small business of his own. He then held elected positions in the Charleston County Council and the South Carolina State House, and the U.S. House of Representatives. In January of 2013, he was sworn in as United States Senator from South Carolina and was re-elected in January 2017. He serves on 5 Senate committees: the Special Committee on Aging, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Finance, the Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. We are so lucky to have him here today with us, so please join me in welcoming Senator Tim Scott.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First time to Notre Dame?
It is indeed. I'm glad there's a Clemson fan up there.
I have to say, when I drove the senator over this morning, I was pointing out things around campus, and I love that you wanted to get your picture in front of Touchdown Jesus.
Listen, that's iconic. I'll tell you what, amazing, amazing. I was also looking for Rudy, but I didn't see him on the campus there, so amazing.
So the way this morning is going to go, we're going to have a conversation, and we should have some time for questions. As always at the center, we'll prioritize the student questions, and we'll try to get as many questions as we can. But let's just talk for a little while.
Certainly. Before we get started, let me just say to Patrick, thank you for Patrick O'Shaughnessy, whose wife this is named for and who passed away several months ago. Thank you for the invitation to your family. I know that you miss her. You all have been very, very much a part of my entire political career on the national level. And I thank you for who you are and what you represent and the investment that you've made here at Notre Dame. And I can't imagine the sense of loss, but we appreciate who you all are, and God bless the entire family.
Now, usually I assign books, but I've been reading this book the last few days. Let me read a passage. This is from the introduction. Okay. The senator writes, "I wake up every day with a dream for our country that I just can't shake. It is the same dream I had when I first stepped into public service in South Carolina back in 1995. In my dream, the American people are more unified than they ever have been. In my dream, a single mother has everything she needs to be successful. In my dream, our nation is woven together by our core convictions that transcend race, ideology, and any other societal markers or identity."
Yeah.
Tell us about those convictions and that dream.
Yeah, so as a kid who grew up in a single-parent household mired in poverty, the one thing that I didn't understand when I was 14 or 15 as a young person was that we lived in the greatest country on earth. I did not appreciate that when I was a youngster. I was a kid that was disillusioned and angry and unhappy about my circumstances in the situation that I found myself in. I felt like because of poverty and growing up in South Carolina that I had a ceiling over my head. And I had the good fortune of a mother who believed that prayer is the key and faith unlocked the door, and that she would never, ever give up on me. And it was her prayers and her faith and her conviction that one day things would be better that kept me going in the hardest times. And then I met a mentor who was a Chick-fil-A operator who was a small business owner, who started teaching me that any kid from anywhere at any time could rise beyond their wildest imagination. So when I look at that start of public service, those two lives converged within my heart and laid a new foundation of hope and opportunity for me and for this country. And the longer I've lived and the more I served, the more I realize how thankful we should all be that we've been granted the greatest citizenship on earth, to be Americans. And if we understood that we were just one American family, not two, not three, and not tribes, but that we were just one American family, that we would start having a different level of respect and appreciation. If we understood that we all start at different places, but we're in the same race, that sometimes some people need a little more help, and that's okay, as long as they're willing to help themselves. And the one thing in the dream that I have for this nation is that we get along, not because we put our differences to the side, but we focus more on what we have in common. And then we deal with the differences. If we took that tact, I think our nation would find that 90% of the time, we're seeing the same problems, praying for similar solutions, taking different routes to get there. And so my dream, my hope, and my prayer for this nation is that we come together because we have so much at stake. We are the city on the hill. We are the beacon of light in the midst of a global storm. And if we lose our hope, if we lose our purpose, the whole world finds itself in shambles.
We're going to talk a lot about politics, but I thought maybe we'd start with family, because you start with family in your book.
Absolutely.
Your first chapter, I think, is about, you talk about your mother, your parents' divorce. You made that, in the quote I read, you talk about single mothers. So
Yes.
Tell us about your mother and your grandparents.
Well, I love my mama. I'm a mama's boy. I'm not sure. I think we should all take time and say thank God for my moms, because it does matter a lot. My grandparents, when my parents got divorced when I was 7 years old, one of the most important, painful, soul-scarring experiences one can go through, at least for me. Moving in with my grandparents, we were on an Air Force base in Michigan, and we moved back to South Carolina. On Air Force Base in Michigan, we were in a very multiracial environment. You didn't have black friends or white friends, you just had friends. Because on Air Force bases, you just learn to play with whomever shows up. When we moved back to the South, I moved into a 100% black neighborhood. Poor, we had a 700 square foot home. My grandparents were renting the home. It was 2 bedrooms, so me, my brother, and my mother shared one room and one bed for a few years. But my family, while we were lacking in physical resources, it was always abundant in love. And the one thing I walked away with from those years was, my grandfather was doing everything in his power to support his family. And that he believed that if he could, he should. Period. And the dignity of work started there for me. My grandmother was a maid, my mother was a nurse's aide, and they taught me that there is dignity in all work. No matter your job, you have dignity. And for me, that started to percolate, so to speak, over time. And I look back at those years as perhaps some of the happiest years of my life. We were playing on dirt roads, and back in those days, I was less educated, and so I liked wrestling, WWE, and NWA. Forgive me if I have sinned.
You're right about that. Your grandfather?
My grandfather's favorite sport was not football. Mine is football. His was wrestling. And Bobo Brazil was the first black guy to ever. Bobo Brazil, oh yes. Bobo. No one knows. Anyways, back to 2022. My grandfather loved wrestling, so we'd sit there on 1 p.m. on Saturday afternoons. NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, would come on TV, and we'd watch, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. So this is really an educated audience. You guys don't know? Y'all don't know Ric Flair? All right. Yes. The Nature Boy. Ric Flair. So, anyways, it was an amazing experience, right? And it was the time where I saw my granddaddy as happy as he could be. And he grew up in a very different South Carolina. He was born in 1921. He died 6 years ago. In his South Carolina, there was no need for an educated black guy at all. So when he was in the 3rd grade, he was told not to come back to school. Work the fields, pick cotton, and that would be his life forever. The beauty of my grandfather is he knew then, with some doubt now, he believed even then in the goodness of America. He believed that someday, somehow, this nation was heading in the right direction, moving too slow, but heading in the right direction. And the one thing he taught me was I could be bitter or I could get better. I could become a victim or I could become victorious, but I couldn't be on both sides. And that's a really important lesson from a guy who had seen challenges and atrocities and difficulties that I can't even imagine. And so for my granddaddy to teach me those very valuable lessons about the human condition and where we were going as a nation before he ever saw it was such a blessing to grow up in that household, even without resources, even in a segregated area. It was one of the greatest blessings was having a person who believed in unconditional love. And I remember, I hadn't told this story before, it's definitely not in the book, but I brought home a couple of my friends. My granddaddy was he was shaving, and he was about your complexion. So he was definitely a mixed race man. And so my friends come in the house and said, "Granddaddy!" He said, "Timmy!" He couldn't see me. I said, "What you doing, Granddaddy?" He said, "I'm trying to get these white people off my face." And he turned the corner and saw my friends. They were all white. He was like, "Hi." But he didn't have a racist bone in his body. And we didn't feel like everything was so, everything was a code or you had to be so sensitive. We chuckled like nobody's business. And one of my best friends sitting over there on the stairs over there, Joe McEwen, he was there with my grandfather on several occasions, and we were chopping wood. All the lessons I learned about what I didn't know in life, I learned from my granddaddy, and what I needed to know from life, I watched him model it.
I want to turn now to your entering into public service, but your deepest convictions, your political convictions, you learned them at home.
Absolutely.
From your grandfather.
Yeah, I will say that there's nothing more important than family. We're spending $2.5 trillion as a federal government trying to make up for what the family can't do, hasn't done, because of the implosion of the family. I honestly think that we would spend half as much money if we had solid families. That's and I don't even mean that left or right. I just mean that right or wrong. I mean, seriously speaking, the way that I see the world, and one of the reasons why I'm on the side of the Alvin I'm on, is that the world I see starts with me. It is my responsibility to do everything in my power to take care of me. And if I cannot, not if I will not, if I cannot, then I should go to my family first. And if my family can't do it, then we should go to our friends next. And if our friends can't do it, we should go to the church next. If the church can't do it, we should go to the community. The community can't do it, then you go to the city, then you go to the state, then you go to the federal government. In today's society, it just seems like we've flipped it on its head, that we start with the federal government and we work our way back down to the individual, and that is disempowering for the individual. That means
it destroys families.
It destroys families, and frankly, we saw the whole war on poverty. We spent $7 trillion, and the same people are just as poor. $7 trillion in a 50-year war against poverty. We started with poverty around 15%. Today it's around 12.5%, 13%. African American poverty was around 30%. Today it's around 27%. So what we know is that money from the federal government alone doesn't cure the issue. So what does? I think the gospel has a lot to say about what that answer is.
Let me turn to your entry into politics.
Yes, sir.
This is how you describe it. Let me read it here. You're going to run for Charleston County Council.
Yes.
1994.
Yep.
And this is what you write. Believe it or not, I first walked into the Democratic Party offices. I had decided from the start I was going to visit both the Democrat and Republican offices. I entered the Democrat office not because of our ideals or values lined up, but because of the assumption. The assumption was that if you were black in South Carolina, you were a Democrat. Back then, I felt my political affiliation had less to do with my ideology than it did with my identity. When I walked into the Democratic Party offices, I was told I needed to wait my turn and go to the back of the line. The very next day, I attended the monthly meeting held by the Republican Party. And the rest is history?
Relatively. Now, I walked into the Republican office, Charleston County Republican Party, and I said, I want to run for county council. And they said, you know this is the Republican Party, right? I was like, oh, I can tell. Yeah, I can tell. Nevertheless, they said, you know, we've never had a black person win a seat countywide in this county, much less as a Republican. I was like, I know. He says, but if you think you want to run, go for it. So I could wait my turn. It's a seniority system, or I could become more involved with a meritocracy. And my values were more conservative anyways. I think that's, by the way, true for most black people. Faith is very important. Family is strong. There's an entrepreneurial spirit that is present in the African American community. It's a strong support for the military, where the Republican Party. So ideologically, I should have started there. But I finished there because I was so conscious about the fact that as a black person, I should at least go there, but it was just not a fit. And so I went to where, tell them I'll call them back, please. I went to where the fit was, and I'm glad I did. And the rest is kind of history, yeah.
You write in your book about bringing your grandfather to vote in 2008
yes.
for Barack Obama. Can you
Yes.
tell us about that?
Absolutely. So my grandfather, as I described, he was an independent, probably leaning more left than right, though. He actually voted for 2 Republican governors. I don't think he voted for any Republican president. So in 2008, I remember taking him to vote. And one of the parts of the story that I didn't mention was that he never learned to read. And so he was illiterate his entire life, but he had a photographic memory. So he could figure out how to get around and get along at work and in the community. And so when I was taking him to vote for Barack Obama, not for McCain or Romney, we walked into the voting booth, and the people at the signing counter saw me, and I was clearly a Republican. And my grandfather said, I want Timmy, my name is Timmy at home, he said, I want Timmy to come and assist me. And the little lady said, you want somebody else to help you? My granddaddy, being the very wise guy, but clear as a bell, he said, no. So we walked into the voting booth together, and I showed him Barack Obama's name, and I said, when you see this on TV, I want you to know who you voted for. So I said, push the button, Granddaddy. And he said, no, you push it. So I pushed it for him. And then I said, you need to push the vote button. And so we went down the ballot. I was running for the state house at that time, but I was not in his district, so he didn't have to make a decision there. Thank God. Praise Jesus. And I think he would have voted for me, though. And so he would vote, and we got in the car, and the first time I saw my grandfather cry was April 29th, 2001, when my grandmother passed away, his wife of 57 years. And I looked over and saw tears streaming down his cheeks because he could not believe that America had evolved so far that there was even a prospect of an African American president. And I just saw this pride fill his heart and in his face, and without any question, he was so proud of the country and so excited, and he didn't care whether, he did care. he thought it was as important to have a black man winning the nomination of a party because he thought it was impossible, the outcome. And so just that drive, the silence was deafening, but powerful and encouraging that our country had come so far, so fast. You think in 1965, 1970, forward is how my grandfather measured the success and the progress of this nation as he looked back. And it's just a powerful moment for me. I'll never forget it.
You write about the progress of the country. Let me read this passage.
Sure.
Yeah, this is from a chapter titled The Black Experience, and this is the beginning of the chapter. I am completely proud to be an American. I am proud of the progress we have made. The distance we have traversed over the past 245 years is staggering. How far we have come in the past 50 years in terms of racial equality and justice is incredibly encouraging. Elsewhere in the book, you write about being pulled over for a DWB, a driving while black. You say 20 times. More than 20 times.
At least 20 times, yeah.
So you recognize racism exists.
Absolutely.
But you're thoroughly optimistic,
100%.
including about race relations.
Absolutely.
Talk us through that.
Yeah, so part of the challenge I think we have as a nation right now, to be honest with you, and this is such an important topic. Thank you for asking that question or bringing that point up. We sometimes only tell one side of the ledger, whatever side of the ledger you're on. If you think that the country is irreparably broken and racist to the core, you look for it, darn near celebrate it, and it's almost all you see. The other side seems to suggest that if you see any racism at all, that you're just thinking about 1865 and you're stuck in the past. If you're going to have an honest conversation about race in America, I think you have to share both sides of the ledger. I think you honestly have to understand and appreciate that life is harder for some people based on the color of their skin than it is for other people. That is just a basic fact in America. That does not mean that we haven't made incredible progress at the same time. The fact that I've been stopped now probably 24 times by law enforcement for just driving while black. I remember I've been stopped 4 times in the last 14 months, and one time for not using my turn signal early enough in a turn. Fascinating experience. Not all of my experiences have been that. I mean, I've been stopped at the Capitol from coming in, physically stopped from coming in because there's no way I could be a senator even though I'd been there for 6 years. So it doesn't go away, but it only covers a part of the picture. The other part of the picture is that when I had a car accident when I was 16 years old and I fell asleep driving down the street, driving down actually the interstate, 70 miles an hour, rolled through traffic going east, rolled through traffic going west, and the law enforcement officer that pulled over, he was so compassionate, so sincere, so caring that I loved that guy instantly because of the way he responded. I remember him walking over to me after they got me out the car, with blood everywhere, glass in my backside, and they laid me on the side of the road, and he said, "Son, your mama's gonna be so happy you're alive." I looked at him and said, "Sir, you don't know my mama." But he was sincerely trying to tell me that there was something more important than the car. There's something more important than all the things that you could ever accumulate. Your parents love you unconditionally. He didn't know my mom, but he knew that every mother loves their child unconditionally. And he wanted to make sure that I understood that the accident that was my fault would not weigh on my mother's conscience like it did mine. And it's one of the reasons why I have a whole chapter in there about law enforcement. And the conclusion on the chapter on law enforcement is that we are blessed in this country to have men and women who respond to a mission, like Romans 13 talks about people being given a sword to be ministers of the gospel in government. And 98% of the people who show up for work, maybe 99% of law enforcement officers show up to do a mission take care of their community, go home to their family, and repeat it again. We should thank God Almighty. We live in a country where the vast majority of law enforcement officers do their jobs in an exemplary way. So I thank God for it, and I celebrate the sacrifices of people like Cassie Aaliyah, the widow of an officer who lost his life on the job in Columbia, South Carolina. So when you understand both sides of the ledger, when you understand that John Moniz, my Chick-fil-A operator, who taught me about being an entrepreneur and a free marketeer, was a white guy. The fact that the guy who talked to me about Jesus, and this is my chapter on the Black experience, was a white guy. When you think about the fact that my best friend in this room, Joe McEwen over there on the stairs, is a white guy. Mentors that I've had, black and white. The truth is there's two sides of the story. And most people, most of the time, want to help people who want to help themselves, not based on the color of your skin, just based on the effort you put forward. So yes, we have challenges, but I'd also say, longest answer in American history, by the way, but I'd also say that while there are racial issues, I can't imagine what it feels like to be a kid with Down syndrome. I can't imagine what it feels like to be a person in a wheelchair. I can't imagine what it feels like to be discriminated against because of my religion. I'm starting to understand that now because things are changing in America. But there are lots of reasons why people feel discriminated against, and they might be right. But the question is, do you become the victim because of what you feel, or do you remain victorious and look for a way to understand and appreciate it all? My last comment I will say is that I had the good fortune of helping raise my nephew from 7 years old. He grew up in a single-parent household in Augusta, Georgia, on the wrong side of the tracks. I will say that going to his graduation at Georgia Tech, he got a degree in biomedical engineering. It was like the World Congress. And he had black friends and white friends and lots of Indian friends at Georgia Tech. Chinese friends, one of his best friends, this kid from Africa was another one of his best friends. And then 2 or 3 of them went on to Duke to get their masters in engineering and management. And they started a couple of app companies or something. Now they're all into Bitcoin. I don't know what that means, but I am on the banking committee. I better figure it out real fast. And then he went on to medical school at Emory. And every single time I meet with his group of friends, and they never could find their wallets, by the way. I don't know what that's about, but parents, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? It's always a very diverse group of people. So when I say I'm optimistic about America's future and race, here's what I know. We are better than we've ever been. Honestly, I know if you watch the news, you would think that I'm completely lost my mind, but the truth is, we are better than we've ever been, and it's getting better. The only thing that stands in our way is the fact that media has figured out that you can make a lot of money off of conflict. Stoking fears is very, very profitable. Trust me, and you all are experiencing the same thing I'm experiencing. You look around and people are dating who they want to date, they're living where they want to live, they're going to schools they want to go to. It's one of the reasons why I talk about Georgia Tech and Duke and Emory and talk about who he is, where he started, and where he is now. The fact of the matter is that I can't think of a better time to live in America than 2022 until next year, 2023, right? We are just constantly getting better. We've got challenges, we've got issues. We need to face those issues and diffuse the time bombs that we see. But we are living in the greatest era to be alive in the greatest country on earth.
I want to ask you one more question on this subject.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we were talking about this morning at breakfast. In the book, you write in about an experience you had with Joy Reid on MSNBC.
Oh, yes.
She was reporting on a press conference.
She
You were
was.
at the press conference.
I was.
I think it was on the minimum wage press conference.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm quoting from your book, but she said, "You've got to love Tim Scott standing there to provide a patina of diversity." And this is what you write in the book, and this is a long passage. But I figure I'll read it here because you'll speak for a while anyway. So.
I'll try to stay awake. Go ahead.
I'm a black man. I know this because when I looked in the mirror this morning, I was black. It wasn't a shock. I've been black my whole life. Joy Reid is also black. But I would suggest she has a limited view of the capacity of people who look like us. In her world, a black man should not be able to have his own opinions about economic policy. And it's not just her. In the eyes of most liberal elites, a black man needs to stay in his place, over on their side of the aisle. In their world, the only reason I would ever attend a press conference is to be used as a prop. I'm going to skip a little bit. The idea that a black man might know something about the minimum wage or immigration or the economy or international relations or anything at all for that matter should not be a surprise to anyone. Still, whenever I share, dare I say, expert opinions on these subjects, members of the media and some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle hurl the same tired, thinly veiled, racist accusation. There's no other way to say it. Their low expectations are the very definition of racism. It's that simple. And I hear it in some way, shape, or form weekly, if not more often. You're not supposed to be a conservative.
No doubt.
Because you're black.
Absolutely.
What would you say to young African-American conservatives?
Yeah. First, I'd say, God bless you. And soon. It's a harder journey without any question, but the truth of the matter is you should just be who you are. I mean, every one of us should be comfortable in our own skin. That's one of the blessings of being Americans, that we have an opportunity to do so. I'd also say that if you're a conservative of any ilk these days, especially if you're young, whether you're black or white, there's a lot of pressure for you to conform to the group mentality. The group thinking is a dangerous concept in and of itself. One of the reasons why I pointed out Joy Reid, because she loves making me a piñata. She loves to hit me as often as possible. And I guess that's why they pay her $7 million, is because she's really good at hitting conservatives who happen to be black. But the truth is that when you think about the economic policy, especially the minimum wage, I find myself a little frustrated with her comments there, less because of who I am, but more the signal it sends to other conservatives, especially younger minorities who are told, by the way they attack me, don't you dare stick your head up. We will rip it off. That is a very terrible sign. Simply say this about the minimum wage as well. As we have this discussion about a $15 minimum wage, one thing you have to realize is that when you take the minimum wage from $7.50 to $15, the first thing you do is you eliminate starter jobs. And you eliminate starter jobs for people who need the skill set to climb the economic ladder. The second thing you must realize is that if you're trying to find a way to help single moms like the one that raised me, 1.6% at the time, I looked at the study back in 2018 or 2019, 1.6% actually made the minimum wage. And so the fact of the matter is that 2/3 of the people making the minimum wage live in households that are over 300% of poverty. And so it is not about figuring out how to make it easier for those folks living in poverty. You're actually making an increase in compensation for households that are already 300% above poverty. And so the truth is that when you study the numbers, you come to a conclusion about what is the right direction. And finally, whenever the federal government comes in and says, we're here to help you, you should chuckle. Number one. Number two, if we're going to artificially create a minimum wage, we're going to also increase the cost of whatever is supported or created by that minimum wage. Said differently, in 2022, with 8.3% inflation driven by $4 trillion of unnecessary excessive spending by the federal government, that's kind of what happens when you artificially increase the minimum wage without increasing the production tied to that minimum wage. And she not thinking that I had anything to say about the minimum wage is problematic and reinforces the negative stereotypes that too many of African Americans have to carry with them, even when they're attacked by other African Americans.
Not allowing young people to think for themselves.
Absolutely. Teach them how to think, but not what to think.
That's what we tried to do.
Amen.
Yeah. You write about President Trump in the book.
I did.
2 stories. One about him and your mother.
Yes,
your
my mother. Yep.
And the other about a pretty sharp confrontation you had with him.
Yes.
After the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville.
Yes.
So tell us both stories.
Yeah, so when Charlottesville happened and the president said that there were good people, President Trump said there were good people on both sides, I disagreed with him vehemently, and I had an opportunity to say so on HBO Vice, I think is what it was called. And I said he had, in my opinion, compromised his moral authority by his comments, and if you're bringing America together, this is not the way to do it. And it caught his attention. And so he invited me to the Oval Office to have a conversation. And
He saw your comment.
He saw my comment. And his communications department, I'm sure, shared with him my comments. And so he calls me up, and I'm not sure if any of y'all have watched President Trump on TV, but he's not necessarily the kind of guy that takes a punch lightly. Anybody disagree? So having been invited to the White House to have a conversation about race relations and my comments about moral authority, I was uncomfortable, to say it nicely. I was like, darn. Especially, being a Republican who wants to run for re-election, when President Trump comes out after you, your numbers plummet very quickly. He's a force to be reckoned with. But I felt like I had a moral obligation to speak the truth in public. And Ephesians 4:15 says, speak it in love, but speak the truth. And so I did that. And so I got to the Oval Office, and we started having a conversation. I went through my grandfather's life and my mother's challenges with black and white water fountains and not being able to go into restaurants and hotels. And he listened intently, which I was stunned that he was actually listening intently. And literally about 30 minutes later, 20 minutes later, he had not uttered a single word. He actually listened. I was so thankful that instead of having just a moment of stress challenges that led to an eruption, he diffused the bomb a little bit by paying attention. And then at the end of the hour-long meeting, he basically said, Tim, show me how to help the people I have offended. And I didn't go in there with any actual assumption that he would ask a question like that. I just went in there assuming that my head would be chopped off. So I really think it was a God thing. And I said, there's this thing I've been working on called opportunity zones that would bring more resources into the poorest communities, private sector dollars. And he said, as a developer and as a builder, I understand that. And let's work on it together. And because of his support, my legislation around opportunity zones became law and has brought almost $80 billion committed to the poorest communities in this country, the largest economic opportunity program in the private sector crafted in the last 50 years in the federal government, brought to us because we had a major confrontation and differences on the issue of race. And so I thank God Almighty that he allowed that situation to play out the way that he did. And President Trump, frankly, was deferential enough to listen and then act, as opposed to trying to defend his comments. We didn't come to the conclusion where we were on the same side of racial history. I don't want to pretend like we did. We didn't need to, though. But from that moment forward, there was a new level of respect. And we worked on funding for historically black colleges and universities that we took to the highest level ever. We worked on sickle cell anemia funding. We brought the unemployment rate for African Americans and Hispanics and Asians to the lowest level in the history of this country. We did that together. We reformed the tax code, bringing tax cuts to single moms, like the one that raised me by 73%. We did all that together as a result of the conflict in Charlottesville. So thank God for a president who listened in that moment. And I think sometimes all we see is what he looks like on TV. We don't get to see what happens behind the scene. And he's a very different person. I mean, I can't imagine being attacked 4 years every single day by every media outlet, save one or two. I don't know what that does to your psyche, but I know that in that moment, he thought of me as a sincere person, and we had a great conversation. Second story is that my mother's 75th birthday, I really wanted her to get a letter from the president, and Mick Mulvaney, a good friend of mine from South Carolina, was his chief of staff at that time. God bless Mick, and more importantly, God bless President Trump, because Mick's a handful. Anyways, we were freshmen in Congress together. He went to the White House, and I called Mick and said, if the president could send me a letter from my mom, that'd be great. Video would be better. That's unrealistic, so just give me the letter. And it came up to almost my mother's birthday, which is February 4th, and didn't have a letter, a little frustrated, but I understand. He's President of the United States, goodness sake, right? And so I'm driving her to her surprise birthday party, and my phone rings, right? And I said, hello, will you hold for the President of the United States? I'm like, who? And President Trump gets on the phone, and he doesn't say Tim, he says, Tim? I'm like, is it Tim? I'm like, yes, Mr. President. I said, how are you doing, sir? He says, I hear this is the birthday for a very special woman. I said, yes, sir. He says, may I talk to her? I said, yes, sir. I said, Mom, it's the President of the United States. And for about 13 minutes, it felt like. She said, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I said, Mom, he heard you the first time. Both God and President Trump. How about having a conversation? And so it was a 15-minute ride for about 10 minutes. They just talked like they were old friends. It was the most amazing experience. And then when we hung up, he said, he fell in love with my mom. And he says, if there's anything I can ever do for y'all, please let me know. And then one day I said, I would love for my mother. I mean, think about it. This is a nurse's aide, 16 hours a day, 3 days a week, 8 hours a day, 2 days a week, never made much more than minimum wage, having a conversation with the president. I said, I'd love for her to take a ride on Air Force One if it ever happens. About a year later, he calls me. I think it was the Clemson Tigers versus the LSU Tigers for the national championship. He says, I'm going to go to the game. You think your mom's available? I'm like, I am. Back in North Charleston, we say, who that? Yeah. So we got her on the Air Force One. He gave her his seat and just treated her like a queen. And so I just wish people had a 360 view of the president. While we disagree on some issues without any question, there is a compassion that we don't always see. And sometimes we just judge the cover on the outside, and we might do a better job turning the pages a little bit.
I have to introduce another side of
Yes, sir.
the president. I have a long quote here from a statement you released on January 5th.
Yes.
Let me pass that and go to a tweet you made on January 6th, 2021. Your tweet. The violence occurring at the United States Capitol right now is simply unacceptable, and I fully condemn it.
Absolutely.
In your book, you write about that day,
Yes.
And you're meeting with senators in Chaplain Black.
Yes.
Tell us about January 6th, 2021 for Senator Scott.
Yeah, so I was in the Senate chambers when they came hunting for politicians to do away with, from my perspective. And, I blame the people who broke into the Capitol looking for people to do harm to and to do what they wanted to do. And I don't blame the people who were outside. I blame the folks who broke the law, came into the Capitol, wanted to do harm. And to me, one of the things I say in the book is that I should hold them responsible for the threat that they were making against my life. As we were, myself, Tom Cotton, we were rolling our sleeves up. Tom is a Harvard grad, former infantry guy. I had Todd Young, senator for the state, Navy Academy guy. We were rolling our sleeves up, taking our jackets off, looking for some kind of a weapon, pins, something so we could defend ourselves until we died if necessary. And so it was a really intense moment in that chamber. And so looking back on that, I see all the media coverage on who should be blamed, President Trump and so many others. And I said, honestly, I don't blame President Trump. I blame the perpetrators who were in the Capitol. But in the scene that happened in the escape room that we got to, lots of combustion in the room. People cussing at each other, yelling at each other.
These are all senators?
All senators. Some staff, but 95 senators probably in the room at the time. And we were not happy with each other. People were yelling at the police. And the moment came where I really felt like there was this impression placed on my heart, I believe it was from the Lord, that really said, we need divine intervention in this room before we get at each other's throats. So I went up to the microphone and I just said, hey, let's stop fighting with each other. So we need a moment of prayer, not a silence, I'm not sure that James 5:16 says that the silence of the righteous availeth much. It says the prayers of the righteous availeth much. So I said, I want the chaplain to pray for us. Chaplain Black came up to the microphone and he has like the voice of God. He said, "Dear God," everybody stopped, bowed our heads. And we have different faith in the room. Not all Christians, we have Hindus, we have just a very diverse group of folks, including people who don't believe at all. But there was dead silence in the room. When we listened to the chaplain pray for us to get our acts together, he said it nicer than that. Prayed for unity, prayed for us to finish what the Lord has called us to do. And from that moment forward, literally from that moment forward, the tension in the room dropped 50 points. It was palpable. And we were there for another 6 hours. And you saw people sharing, Republicans and Democrats sharing victuals, food, just doing the things that you would expect that Americans in a crisis would do. And we did it. And then at 8 o'clock that night or so, we decided that we were going to go out there and finish our job and certify the election. And that was a historic moment. It's one of the reasons why I've also concluded that while many people say our democracy was in jeopardy, not even close. The actions of the senators in that room, Republicans and Democrats, were focused on preserving the republic, serving the people, and doing it out in public, in the chamber, come heck or high water. And I'm so thankful that we did what we were supposed to do. So that's it.
I have one more question. I want to invite our students. Do we have a microphone for the student? I want to invite our students. We'll take some questions. We have 20 minutes for questions from the students. I have one final question. I just noticed, looking at the book this morning, chapter 5 is titled Tim Scott for President.
Ah. Yes.
Anything you want to?
Yes, I wrote a whole chapter about my run for presidency of the student government body at Stall High School. Yes.
Anything you want to share with us this morning?
It's a good chapter. You should get the book.
Okay, as I mentioned before, we have a tradition here. We invite our undergraduate students to ask the first question. Ella, where are you? Ella's right over here. Any student questions? We want to get you on the microphone. There's a large live streamed audience, so this is being live streamed. Any questions? Okay, go ahead, go over to the microphone, please. Yeah. And if you students, if you have a question, please make your way over to the microphone and we'll get a line. Introduce yourself, tell us who you are and where you are at Notre Dame. And
I think I met him earlier. Is that Luca?
That's me.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Luca Finucchi. I'm a sophomore here in Fisher Hall, studying political science and Italian language.
Ooh.
And as a former high school treasurer, I wanted to ask you this.
Yes, sir.
So you're on the banking committee right now in the Senate, correct?
Rumors have it. Yes, sir.
And there's some speculation if Republicans take back the Senate, you'll be appointed chair. What would you do for regulation or deregulation? What would you do if you took over right now?
If I took over right now, the first thing I would do is probably focus a lot on oversight. We have had so little oversight over our financial markets from the conservative side that I believe that many of the actions from the SEC and the CFPB have been unconstitutional and illegal. I'd love to bring more oversight over those areas. Second thing I'd do is focus on what I believe is part of my life mission, which is financial independence. There are really only 3 ways for us to create wealth in this country. People can't give you equity, really. You hear a lot of that conversation about DEI and specifically around equity in America. You have to earn equity. It should not be given to you. Ultimately, I know you can inherit it, but I'm not talking about that. So the truth is, from a banking perspective, you focus on 3 major areas. One is real estate, home ownership, and how we treat the mortgage market is really important. The second is equity position in the stock market. Today, there are forces in the SEC would love to go back to fee-based trades in order to insulate the American people from making bad decisions. I don't know that I don't agree with paternalistic state. I think I should be free to win or lose, make my own decisions. And so I'd fight tooth and nail to make sure that we continue the place where gaining an equity position in the marketplace could happen in one stock or 100 at a time, as well as examining the rest of the financial markets. And the third way that you do that is through the creation of small businesses. So the entrepreneurialism is really important. I'd like to focus on making sure that small dollar lending is a part of the apparatus today. Many banks won't get involved in small dollar lending because it's just too expensive. I like for us to force the issue and create a more competitive environment that reduces the regulatory challenges for many financial institutions that would be willing to get into the marketplace. Finally, fintech is coming. It's actually here. And we learned that during the pandemic, we had about 400 or 500 lenders for the Paycheck Protection Program that we helped craft. We needed about 4,000, not 400. And so we had to expand the footprint to include the fintech world. And so if we did that well, I think we'd be in a good position. And finally, we're going to have to deal with stable coins, cryptocurrency, as it relates to the future from an economic standpoint.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Andrew Foote. I'm a junior finance and economics major.
Uh-oh.
And
I withdraw my comments.
yeah, exactly. My question is for Notre Dame graduates like myself and Clemson grads, or soon-to-be graduates, I guess. What are the biggest challenges that are going to be facing us graduating in the next couple of years? And what do you recommend to us to face those challenges?
I say from an economic perspective, we've been trying to figure out whether we're in a recession or not as a country. You know, the old technical definition of a recession is 2 negative quarters of growth. We had that in the first and second quarter. The third quarter is around 2.3% growth. So that's good news. Bad news is it's kind of like squeezing all the water out of the water hose. So I think this third quarter might be the high water mark for the next 18 months, which means that the rest of that recession that we've been talking about will probably be felt by the American people. You look at the fact that this came out today, I think it was, we created about 263,000 jobs, but our unemployment rate went up from 3.5 to 3.7%. So we have some, I think, headwinds coming your way. The good news is if you're a college graduate, you're going to be better off than the vast majority of Americans. That's really good news. Notre Dame and Clemson, I wish you guys would have gone to Charleston Southern, but you didn't know about Charleston Southern, so I forgive you. That's go Bucks, where I went to school. Everybody's like, where's Charleston Southern? Charleston. Anyways, I think you're going to be okay as an econ major. There are a lot of opportunities coming your way. Here's what you've seen today specifically, and you've seen a trend over the last couple weeks, is that the tech sector, layoffs, a lot of layoffs, a lot of challenges. Lyft led the way, I think, about a week ago. You saw Elon making his announcements yesterday and today. So there are some rumbles in the jungle, so to speak, that are going to be kind of difficult. Perhaps the more important issue that I would say that you face as younger Americans is this concept of living in a post-truth America. To me, that is your greatest obstacle from my perspective. Having a universally defined, a universal definition for inflation reduction versus inflation reduction versus increases is really important. I think having a bedrock definition of truth so that we have an objective standard, so that we can know whether we're applying it fairly to everyone, so that we have the rule of law. Today's America, people really say, Congress members say, it's not what the facts are, it's how I feel. This concept of your truth and my truth ain't true. It's your experience and my experience, yes, but we only have one truth. That is going to weigh on the shoulders of this nation for a very long time, and we have to figure out how to wrestle our way out of this postmodern view that in order for us to make progress, we have to redefine what it means to make progress, or what it means to be financially literate, or what it means to graduate from school. So that post-America is concerning for me. Post-American truth is very concerning.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
What do you think the final score of the game tomorrow is going to be?
I want to go home today.
Ballot.
Oh, yeah. I'm on the ballot, which means that none of the Notre Dame students can vote. Which is good news. Yes. How many Clemson Tigers are there in the House? How many Clemson Tigers know that I'm a Carolina Gamecock fan? So I can't win no matter what I say, but I'm going to go with Clemson 31-23. Get the car! Get the car! I'm not kidding. What's a man going to say? Sorry.
Hi, Senator. My name's Aiden. I'm a senior finance major. Two of us in a row. Sorry about that.
Me too.
I'm also in the constitutional studies minor here.
Oh, man. You're smart.
Wish. My question after your story about January 6th,
Yes, sir.
kind of that positive dialogue that eventually came in the trying hours of the late hours of January 6th. My question is kind of how do we engage with people that might disagree with us and there's no kind of apparent common ground? I'm talking like the aunt that no one wants to invite to Thanksgiving dinner because you know it's just going to be a mess. How do we engage with those people in a positive manner?
Well, Aiden did a really good job of weaving in my concept of the American family. Sometimes your crazy uncle does want to come to Thanksgiving, so I get your point. So here's what I believe that we have to have in order for us to have hard conversations with people who disagree with us vehemently. First thing, we have to have rapport. Too often in today's society, we rush towards the problem without establishing rapport first. Once you have rapport, and rapport typically happens if you're all, let's say, not all, but let's say you're students of Notre Dame, find the common core principles that you all believe in. Find some hobbies or habits that you enjoy. Doing those first, talking about that first, establishes the rapport. And then credibility comes from having a serious debate or conversation around a problem that you both see. And being credible, being able to defend what you believe in is so important. And then you have permission to debate the problem itself. And then you can present solutions to the problem. And then you can repeat the process. But if there's no rapport and credibility, it's really hard to bridge the gap. And one of the things I try to do, especially as a conservative who happens to be black, I go where I'm not invited. I speak to groups that don't invite me to speak. I call them. And what I try to do is establish rapport first so that I have the credibility to have a debate about the underlying issues that it will impact the world where they and where I live as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir, Aiden. Have a good day.
Hi, I'm Carlos from Penguin Hall. I'm a major in political science, minor in business econ, and the Hasbro Public Policy Program. And what do you think?
Anytime they read your question, I get nervous. Go ahead, Carlos.
What do you think should be done about the student loan crisis? Do you think universities should be held more accountable to, with students taking out these big loans and not being able to find employment or just like being in debt for like majority of their lives?
Thank you so much for being here today. I look forward to talking to you next week. Carlos, so I think the answer is kind of simple, to be honest with you. One of the things I've done, I've co-sponsored it with a Democrat, is financial literacy on the college campuses so that you know the value of your education, you know the value of your degree, so that we can have a serious conversation about, do you really want to major in political science like I did, right? The ROI on a political science degree, other than going to law school, is not as good as a business degree, right? So you should know the actual cost and the return on your investment. Second thing I'd say is that the average student in the nation has around a $35,000 student loan debt for a 4-year degree. Having spoken to thousands of students around college campuses and interns in my office, about 20 to 25% of that student loan debt is basically a lifestyle decision. They buy the nicer phones, they live in the nicer apartments, and they eat at places that aren't cafeterias. It's just a lifestyle decision. But the $35,000 worth of debt that becomes problems for most college students are those who don't graduate. That's where you see the lowest return, the lowest repayment of those student loans, those who don't graduate. The other thing I'd say is that most students today, if you have a Stafford or a government loan, student loan, your payment cannot go above 10% of your gross income, which means that you get to live on 90% of what's left over, which means that no matter how much student loan you have, it's 10% of your income. That's a cap in your payments, and it's LIBOR plus a little bit, which means that your interest rate for those loans unless you have a very old loan and you're too young to have an old loan, the loan would have to be older than you, and that would be impossible unless you came here when you're 2. Did you come here when you were 2? 3, okay, got it. So anyways, so there's a cap, and then there's a 10 or 15 year expiration where the loans basically wash away at 15 years later. So the truth is we've done a lot of accommodating of students and student loans already. I'm opposed to writing off $1.6 trillion of student loans that people signed up for and said, I will pay it back. I'm opposed to that, just to be clear. And finally, for those of you who will go on to graduate degrees, I would say that my nephew, who as you can tell, I'm very proud of my nephew. He'll have some student loans, especially becoming a doctor. If he works for a nonprofit for 10 years, including the 4 years he's in not internship, but residency, those 4 years washes away 40%. So 6 more years, it eliminates all of the student loans. That's true for teachers and for other professionals if you are willing to invest your time into public service in some ways, depending on what you want to do. So there's a lot of options already available. I think me passing along my student loan debt to my mother, who never had a chance to go to college, is just wrong.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, sir.
My name is Adam. I'm a freshman in Fisher Hall studying political science and global affairs.
Adam.
I'd like to apologize. My question was a little bit long-winded. Sorry.
My answers are all long-winded, so don't worry about it.
Perfect. So as a leader in the Republican Party, you surely are aware that there is a division within the party. Currently, a very large populist sect of the party has kind of, gone very much loyalty to Donald Trump, and they are saying the election was stolen, election fraud has become a major talking point for many people running across the country for Secretary of State, Senator, House Representative. So you have this division in the party that's reflecting poorly politically for the Republicans. For example, Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, is having a lot of trouble right now getting on her political footing to mount a 2024 presidential campaign. So my question more so is, from your perspective, how do you see that division within the Republican Party kind of playing out over the next 2 to 4 years, especially given the likely fact that Donald Trump will run again in 2024?
Well, I'm glad you know the future, because I don't, number one. Number two, I'd say that without any question, Adam, that what I tell all my Republican friends is that the road to socialism leads right through a divided Republican Party. So something has to be more important than yourself or your side. It's the country. I'm a conservative because I believe that the conservative party represents more of the solutions, not all of the solutions, but more of the solutions than the other side. But I love America a whole lot more than I love the Republican Party, period. And so if we come together around core principles and values that leads to American flourishing, we should support those things. If we are going to be the party of the future, we have to be a party driven by principles and not personalities. It's just true. Whether you're on Trump's side or not on President Trump's side, the truth is I'm going to always focus on the underlying principles that undergird flourishing of humans. We are the hope, in my opinion, of a better future. That's America, and then conservative principles that have been ingrained into our Judeo-Christian foundation.
Thank you, Senator.
By the way, Adam, don't forget, and this is part of the challenge with the current media streams that we see, 87% of media coverage of Republicans or conservatives is negative. Always remember that in part we're being indoctrinated. I say that to say this: the tribal nature of the Democratic Party has created fissures that are problematic if you're a Democrat. So the truth is that the human condition comes with challenges, and they manifest in parties. So it's not a Republican Party or Democrat thing, it's really a human condition. Thankfully, on Tuesday, I think we'll be happy that we coalesced around our candidates, no matter what side of the Republican Party you may or may not be in. I think we're far more unified about winning and restoring sanity to the country than we've ever been.
Thank you, Senator.
We have 5 students in about 10 minutes, and we're going to try to get through them all, okay?
All right, so he said, stop talking so much.
Yeah.
Dr. Munoz is so nice.
Please, ma'am.
Good morning, Senator.
Hey, ma'am.
My name is Noelle. I'm a classics and philosophy major senior. In politics, there tends to be a handful of issues that receive all the attention. So my question for you is, are there any issues on the back burner that you wish you received more questions about than you do?
Thank you, Noelle. Pretty name, by the way. I wish we spent more time talking about what actually makes the country work. We spend so much time in the weeds on top line, front of the newspaper issues that are going to go away tomorrow or the next month, and so little time on what actually undergirds human flourishing. What really is the American dream built on, and how do we sustain it? What is this notion of social mobility? What does economic opportunity mean for all kids, no matter what zip code you're living in? And how do we spend $750 billion on public education and we still have kids who can't read or write? Why is it that 70% of the incarcerated population can't read beyond the 4th grade and we hadn't figured that out? To me, if we had that kind of philosophical debate on those underlying issues, the large front page of the newspaper issues that we see would cease to be as important as they are today, because we'd solved some of them before they got to the front page. So I'm working on something called America 2030, because I think it's more important for us to think not about my election cycle, but more important, I started this in 2018, so that I can understand what a first grader would see when they're graduating from high school. I want to think in 12-year increments, not in election cycles. How you doing?
Hi, my name is Isabel. I'm a senior biochemistry and Africana studies major.
Yes, ma'am.
And my question to you is, I know you discussed about how racism is a part of the United States, but just to push the envelope a little further, in what ways can policy address the issue of racism without further sowing division within our country right now?
It's a great question. So one of the things I'd say is that the first 190 years of our history, we were challenged with dealing with race. And one of the challenges that we see are the lingering effect of the first 190 years. One of the things I celebrate is the last 52 years of American history, where we've turned the corner and we've had dramatic progress in every sector of this nation. We should celebrate it more, which would be very helpful. And the second thing we should do is don't try to solve past racism with more discrimination today. I'll give you a couple of examples. So in the 1990s, by the way, I'm watching my 2-minute answers to get us to the 4 questions there. In the 1990s, there were the 2 settlements with the USDA, I believe it was, the Pigford settlements, billion-dollar settlements, because the USDA, the agriculture sector of our country, discriminated against black farmers. Dead wrong. But it was condoned for a very long time, and my grandparents would tell you a lot about that. Well, today, the current administration passed a $5 billion set-aside just for black farmers. Now, if it was wrong to discriminate against black farmers then, it's wrong to create preferential treatment for black farmers now. If in the FHFA, which is the home mortgage apparatus, you now get preferential treatment in part of the programs, or at least one of the programs for black homeowners. Why? The homeowner rate is 44% for blacks and about 70% for whites. The gap is too big. But you don't fix that by having embedded in the policies and the laws of this country more discrimination. The Supreme Court is hearing right now the affirmative action laws. And I will tell you that I hope, if California, one of the most liberal places in the country, has voted twice for a colorblind constitution, they voted against racial preferences in California, I gotta believe that the rest of the country would be even higher. And by the way, majority of blacks, Hispanics, Asians also voted against those preferences in California. So if we just get to a place where we're not gonna be colorblind, I think that's ridiculous. We're not actually colorblind. I can see that you're an attractive woman wearing a mustard colored shirt, right? And you have on the tie that matches her sweater, by the way. So I can see these things. I'm not gonna run away from color as an American. I should embrace that diversity makes us stronger. So I love diversity, but I'm not going to give you a better leg up. The way that we deal with it is by prioritizing all people living in the same circumstance. Whether you're black or white, you're living in poverty. I want first-generation college students to have an opportunity to go forward. I want folks who are stuck in poverty, whether you're in rural South Carolina and you're white, or inner city Chicago and you're black. I want to make sure that you have quality education in every single zip code in this country. That will help lift us up, and disproportionately, you'll be helping minorities.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Luke Schaefer. I'm a senior majoring in economics with the minor in constitutional studies. I finished your book this morning, and at the end you mentioned that we should think about the world, or America, in 2070.
Yes.
I'll admit I struggled to maintain your optimism, to see this bright future for the country. And in your speech today, you talked a little bit about struggles for people of faith in this country. So how do you maintain this sense of optimism in light of the challenges facing people of faith?
Yeah, Luke, I think if there is a bright line of discrimination in our future, it's not black or white as much as it is people who are Christians. I think in a post-modern America, or in a post-truth America, Christians are going to feel the sting of discrimination in the way that we have not in my lifetime. So the way I do that, the way I prepare for that, is by making sure that I am spending quality time in my faith. It's how I start every single day, book of Proverbs, and then I spend some time in 2 or 3 Bible studies. I want to make sure that I am equipped with how I'm supposed to treat you, and that I'm warned on how you might treat me in response, which is not necessarily to suggest that you're going to treat me the way I treat you, but I do believe in the golden rule. I do believe in Matthew 22:37-39, that my responsibility is to love God with all my heart and love my neighbor as myself. Doesn't mean that you're going to believe the way that I do, but that is insulation for the world that I live in. And the more time I spend with them, the more peace I have in my heart. The more peace I have in my heart, the more I'm able to deal with the knuckleheads in the world.
Thank you.
Hi, Senator. My name is Rose,
Hey,
and
Rose.
I'm a sophomore studying creative writing. My question for you is, do you think that some of the governmental programs that were designed to help certain communities have actually harmed them?
Absolutely is the simple answer, ma'am. I would say that you think about I spend a lot of time in my office on the opportunity agenda. We focus on workforce development a lot. We focus a lot on education. And I'll tell you that the education system is hard to digest if you're living in a poor zip code. It's offensive how bad education is in some of the poor zip codes in America. We spend $750 billion as a nation on education, K through 12. And we have stunning, dismal results for a lot of those dollars. We could do a lot better. But that system was designed that way, by the way. That system was designed for adults and not for kids. I think from socialism versus capitalism, the easiest way to see socialism is to go to some of the poorest communities in this country, and there are layers of government assistance, but no free market economy in those areas. And if you don't have job creators in the poorest communities, you don't create jobs. You create dependency. And that's not a slight against poor people, because I have half my life been one. The truth is, I want someone to teach me about free markets and capitalism. I want someone to talk to me about the basic principles that literally lead to success. And so those are 2 examples, an economic example and an educational example.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Senator. My name is Matthew Fishburne. I'm a freshman in Pangborn Hall. Like Luca earlier, I'm studying political science and Italian. I'm from the Charleston area as well. And in my time
Where'd you go to high school, Matthew?
I went to Bishop England.
BE. No wonder you're at Notre Dame. It's a Catholic high school in Charleston.
And in my time at BE and in the Charleston area, I've seen our area divided along socioeconomic and largely racial lines as well.
Yes.
I've seen my high school, my community, fail minorities, especially the African American community.
Yes.
And my question would be just asking you, what can we do to bridge these socioeconomic and racial gaps in our communities, but also nationwide, especially in terms of education with our younger generations? Yeah. And I'd also like to hear you talk more about opportunity zones because when I was researching your campaign for the midterm elections a couple weeks ago, that was one of the key components that influenced my decision.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I hope that meant you voted for me. Anyways, if you didn't, I love you anyway. So Matthew, I think you asked a really important question that I cannot answer in less than 9 minutes, so I won't even try to. So I'll just give you the synopsis on the answer. The truth is that we have failed some communities of color because we haven't tried. And frankly, sometimes we don't even go there. And so one of the things that we can do to help bridge the gap is to show up. Not hard, just show up. And frankly, if you think about a denomination, a religious group of people who are doing an outstanding job, comparatively speaking, it's Catholics. Catholic schools has transformed the lives of millions of African Americans who are not Catholic. I think about the chaplain of the United States Senate, who's probably 75 years old, who received a Catholic scholarship when he was 10. He now has 6 graduate degrees, 2 PhDs or 3 PhDs, and 4 masters. He has a photographic memory, and he studies everything from Thomas Aquinas to Aretha Franklin. I mean, so he believes in all philosophers, including Darius Rucker from Charleston. So the power of school choice brought to kids during the pandemic, if you study the numbers of those kids in Catholic schools who stayed in school and those kids in public schools who were home too often, the difference in lifetime income are in the trillions of dollars. So you maybe Bishop England and other schools aren't getting it right enough, but that's a student problem maybe more than the actual apparatus. It's our responsibilities when you see a kid sitting by themselves to invite them into your group. There is an in-group love and an out-group love. I wish we would spend more time introducing our in-group to the people that are just naturally outside. It is so easy to not do that. And since you're the last question, I'm gonna say this to you and to everyone else here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being a participant and laughing and having a good time. Thank you for warming my heart with this wonderful opportunity. Patrick, thank you for investing here. I'll finish with this. I am chief sinner. I live in a wonderful neighborhood, and I have where are my neighbors who are here? Oh, maybe they left. Yeah, a couple of neighbors who were here for the football game and came by here anyways, right? When I come home from my travels, I run in my house, and I don't come out until it's time to leave. We all should spend a little more time getting to know our neighbors, the people at church, the people in school. If we would just embrace the people who are not like ourselves. Myself and Senator James Langford started something called Solution Sundays, trying to find a way to bring people into your home for a bite to eat who are not like you, particularly of different races. If we did that on a continuous basis, we solve our own problems because the government can't solve it, but Americans can. God bless you.
We have an announcement and then 2 last things.
Yes,
the announcement is the senator, actually just practicing what you preach, has agreed to stay for lunch with a few of our students and a few alumni. We're going to let the senator leave first so he can get to lunch with the students.
Okay.
A very short time with them. So
Thank you very much.
we have a gift for you.
Appreciate it.
Now you have to open it now,
Okay.
and you're going to understand, but they're not. So you're going to.
Very nice. All right.
Now there are 2 pair,
Yes.
because one is for Officer Goodman.
Oh, nice.
So, but you have to explain.
Okay. My shortest answer of the day. So there's the officer who was a Time magazine front page who led the senators out of the chamber and into a safe place, Officer Goodman. He and I, it's in my book as well, he and I have had a sock contest for the last 5 or 6 years. And he wins more than I do, to tell you the truth, but don't tell him I said that. So he and I have a sock contest when we come in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And so I'm going to take these and give these to him. So, thank y'all very much.
We're going to go right out.
Everybody, good to see you. Good to meet you as well. God bless you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, man.